The river was dark and restless, its waters moving with a strange power that seemed alive. The human stood near the edge, hearing the sound of rushing waves echoing through the alien forest. The sky above was dim, colored by two moons that cast pale light over the scene. He had come here only to explore, but what he found was something else, something that pulled his heart into danger without warning. A faint cry carried through the wind. At first, he thought it was just the sound of water breaking against rocks. But then it came again, sharper, full of fear. His eyes searched the river, and then he saw her. An alien woman was caught in the river's violent current. Her hands slapped against the surface as she tried to fight the water, but it dragged her down, pulling her toward the sharp rocks hidden beneath the waves. Her long silver hair spread out like broken strands of light, and her eyes, wide with terror, begged for help, even though no words came. For a moment, he froze. She wasn't human, but she was alive, drowning right in front of him. His mind told him to think, to stay safe, but his body moved before his thoughts could stop him. He ran along the edge, searching for a place to dive. The ground was slippery, covered with strange glowing moss that made each step dangerous. He could hear her choking, struggling to stay above water. Without hesitation, he threw off his jacket, took one deep breath, and leapt into the river. The water hit him like a wall, icy and heavy, almost stealing his breath. His muscles burned as he pushed forward, fighting against the force that wanted to drag him under. The current twisted him, spun him, but he kept his eyes on her. She disappeared once, swallowed by the black water, and panic gripped him. He dove, hands stretching into nothing, until, finally, he felt skin. He grabbed her arm and pulled hard, dragging her upward. She gasped for air, coughing violently, as he held her close. The river roared in his ears, trying to tear her away from him, but he refused to let go. He kicked hard, pushing both of them toward the shore. Every second felt longer, every breath harder. The weight of the water pressed down, and his chest burned as though fire was inside him. The woman clung to him weakly, her strength nearly gone. "Hold on," he shouted, though his voice was almost drowned by the rushing waves. His arms ached, his body screamed, but he kept swimming, each movement filled with desperate will. At last, his hand touched something solid, rocks. With the last of his strength, he pulled her onto the shore. Both of them collapsed, coughing, water spilling from their lungs. His chest heaved as he lay there, the world spinning around him, but relief filled his mind. She was alive. The alien woman trembled beside him, her skin, pale and marked with strange patterns, glistened in the moonlight. She looked at him with wide eyes, her lips parting as if to speak, but no sound came out. She seemed shocked, unable to understand why he had risked his life for her. Her people had told stories of humans, cold, selfish, dangerous. But here was one, soaked, breathless, and shaking, who had saved her without a thought of reward. He wanted to ask if she was all right, but before he could, he noticed movement. Shadows flickered at the edge of the forest. Figures stood among the trees, silent, watching. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their armor caught the dim light. More of her kind. He realized they had seen everything. A chill ran through his body, not from the water, but from the weight of their stares. They didn't move closer, not yet. They only watched in silence, as if waiting for something to happen. The woman finally whispered something in her own language, her voice weak, barely rising above the sound of the river. He didn't understand the words, but her tone was full of fear and urgency. She tried to sit up, her body trembling, and her eyes darted toward the shadows. It was clear that those watching meant something serious, something more dangerous than the river itself. The human's instincts told him to leave, to escape before these silent figures decided his fate. But he couldn't abandon her, not after pulling her from death. He stayed by her side, breathing heavily, his muscles tense, ready for whatever came next. The forest grew quieter, the river's roar fading into the background as the watchers stepped closer. Their movements were slow, deliberate, their eyes fixed not on the woman, but on him. He felt the weight of their attention, as if he had crossed a line he didn't understand. Saving her had been the right thing to do. He knew that. But in their eyes, it looked like something else, something that carried meaning he could not see. The woman's hand touched his arm gently, trembling, as if to warn him not to speak, not to resist. Her eyes met his, filled with a strange mix of fear and something else. something like surrender. One of the armored figures stepped forward, tall and imposing, his voice deep and echoing. The words were not in human tongue, but the meaning struck like thunder when the woman translated in a whisper, her voice broken with disbelief. They say you have claimed me. The human's heart pounded, his breath caught in his throat. Claimed? He looked at her, then at the silent figures gathering closer. He had no idea what they meant, but the way they spoke, the way their eyes burned with certainty, told him this was no small matter. Saving her had not ended the danger. It had only begun something far greater, something he could not escape. The air was heavy with silence as the human sat on the wet ground, his body still trembling from the fight with the river. The alien woman sat close to him, her breath uneven, her skin pale from the cold water. But his attention was not on her. It was on the shadows moving closer from the trees. Figures stepped out slowly, one after another, until a circle of tall, armored aliens surrounded them. Their armor shone faintly in the light of the two moons, and strange glowing symbols were carved into their chest plates, like marks of old traditions. None of them spoke at first, but their eyes were sharp and unblinking, fixed on him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Finally, one of them stepped forward. He was taller than the rest, his armor heavier, and his presence carried authority. He looked down at the human, then at the woman lying weak beside him. His voice, when it came, was deep and commanding. The words were in their own language, filled with a rhythm the human could not understand. But the woman's lips trembled as she listened. She shook her head quickly, whispering something back in her own tongue, her voice shaking with disbelief. The leader's reply was louder, his hand raised, pointing directly at the human. His tone left no room for questions. The woman's eyes filled with dread, and she finally turned to the human, whispering in broken words he could understand. They say you saved me. By sacred law, you have taken me. The human blinked, his breath catching. Taken you? His voice was confused, sharp. He shook his head, still trying to process the words. No, I only pulled you out. You were drowning. That's it. But the circle of armored figures didn't move, didn't soften. Their gazes were heavy, as if they were staring at a truth carved into stone. The woman lowered her head, her wet hair clinging to her face, and her voice dropped to a whisper. In their law, saving life means claiming life. They believe my life is now yours. The human's mouth went dry. His heart thudded in his chest as he stared at her, then at them. That's insane, he muttered, but his words felt weak in the thick silence. He saw no trace of doubt in their eyes. To them, this was not strange, not foolish. This was law, older than memory. The leader spoke again, his tone cold but absolute. The woman translated slowly, her voice shaking as if the words burned her tongue. They say you are my bondholder now. You have rights and you have duty. I belong to you. The human's mind reeled. Belong? The word felt wrong, heavy like chains. He stood, water dripping from his clothes, anger building in his chest. I don't want anyone to belong to me, he said firmly, looking around at them. I didn't save her to own her. I saved her because it was right. The circle murmured, the sound low and unsettling, like growls beneath their breath. Their leader's eyes narrowed, glowing faintly in the moonlight. He spoke again, and this time his tone was sharp, almost accusing. The woman looked up quickly, fear flashing in her eyes as she explained. They say your refusal is insult. Refusal means dishonor. Dishonor means war. The human felt the weight of her words crush him. He wasn't just fighting superstition. He was trapped inside it. These people didn't see him as a stranger acting on instinct. They saw him as a man bound by a sacred rule, a man who had unknowingly stepped into their deepest traditions. The alien woman's hands trembled as she clutched the ground. She whispered quickly, her voice urgent. You must be careful. They believe the law cannot be broken. If you deny them, they will punish us both. He stared at her, his chest tightening. But this isn't fair. I don't even know your name. Her lips parted as if the question pained her. My name is Soraya, she whispered softly, her eyes flicking to the leader. And now, my clan believes I am yours. He felt the ground shift beneath him. He had saved a stranger from drowning, but now he stood at the center of something larger than he could grasp. The clan pressed closer, their weapons gleaming faintly at their sides, though none were raised yet. The silence around them was filled with tension, as though the very trees were holding their breath. The leader raised his hand again, and the circle parted slightly. Two figures stepped forward, holding chains of glowing metal. They were not meant for him. They were meant for her. The human's stomach twisted as he watched Soraya lower her eyes, her body shaking with shame. "They will bind me to you," she whispered. "If you accept, they will take us to the clan hall. If you refuse, they will kill us." His pulse raced. He wanted to shout at them, to tear apart their chains, to tell them their law was madness. But the way their eyes burned with certainty made him hesitate. He could feel Soraya's fear in the way her body leaned slightly closer to him, as if seeking protection. She didn't want this fate, yet she knew there was no escape from it. The human clenched his fists, his jaw tight. "I didn't come here to hurt anyone," he said loudly, his voice echoing across the riverbank. "I won't let you harm her." The leader's expression didn't change, but his voice came again, heavy with finality. The woman translated with a broken whisper. "Then prove yourself worthy. If you claim me, you must face the trial of worth. Only then will the bond be accepted." The circle erupted with a sound that was half cheer, half growl, their voices rising together in a chant that echoed into the night. Soraya looked at the human with wide, desperate eyes. "The trial will kill you," she whispered. "No human can survive it, but if you refuse the trial, they will kill me instead." The human stood frozen, the weight of the impossible choice pressing on him. Around him, the aliens closed in, their glowing eyes sharp with expectation. Soraya's trembling hand brushed against his, as if begging for hope. In that moment, the human understood the truth. Saving her from the river had not ended her danger. It had only pulled him into a storm far deadlier than drowning. The human stood stiff, his clothes still heavy with water, his chest still burning from the river. Around him, the circle of alien warriors closed tighter, their glowing eyes never blinking. The sound of their chant still echoed in the air, strong and sharp, like the beat of war drums. His heart pounded, not only from fear, but also from anger. He had not come here to claim anyone, yet they spoke as if his life was tied to this woman's forever. Soraya, the alien woman he had saved, sat weakly by his side, her hair clinging wet to her face. She looked at him with eyes full of sorrow. "You must not refuse," she whispered softly, her voice shaking. "If you do, they will see it as insult. They will strike without mercy." The human clenched his fists, his jaw hard. "This is madness. I saved you because you needed help. That's all. I don't need a law to tell me what is right." But the words meant nothing to the clan. Their leader stepped forward, his towering form blocking the light of the twin moons. His armor glowed faintly, and the marks on it seemed alive in the dim light. He spoke in his own tongue, his tone deep and full of threat. The woman translated with trembling lips. "He says, if you reject the bond, you spit on our ancestors. If you walk away, you dishonor me. They will kill us both." The human's stomach turned. He looked at her fragile frame still shaking from the water, and then at the circle of warriors, each one armed and ready. Escape seemed impossible. His body was still weak, his strength drained from the rescue. And yet, deep inside, something in him refused to bend. "I will not be owned. Not by law. Not by anyone," he said firmly, his voice steady even though his fear scratched at his insides. The warriors growled, a sound that rolled through the night like thunder. Their leader raised his arm high, and at once, two of them stepped forward with glowing chains, the same chains they had shown before. They meant to bind her, to make her his through force, through ritual. Soraya's eyes widened in horror. "If you reject them," she whispered quickly, "they will bind me anyway, and then they will kill you before the dawn." He stared at her, his chest heavy, his thoughts spinning like a storm. He had never imagined a simple act of saving a life would turn into a cage, a choice between false ownership and death. His refusal had not freed her. It had only made her fate worse. The clan leader spoke again, his voice louder this time, his words like fire. Soraya looked down, unable to meet his eyes as she translated. "They give you one chance. Accept the bond, or face the trial of worth. Refuse both, and die where you stand." The human's breath caught. He felt the noose tightening around him, the trap of their sacred law. He could feel the pressure of the warriors' eyes, each one ready to cut him down at a single command. His instincts told him to fight, to escape, to resist. But his mind whispered another truth. If he fought now, Soraya would be the first to suffer. He turned to her, lowering his voice so only she could hear. What happens in this trial? Her lips trembled. The trial is ancient. It was made for our own warriors, to test their strength, their courage. It is fire, pain, and blood. No outsider has ever faced it. No human has ever survived it. Her eyes filled with tears. If you fail, they will tear you apart, and me too. He looked away, staring at the circle. His refusal had brought them here. His choice had sealed the moment. But even as fear clawed at him, something deeper sparked inside. He had not come this far to let her die for a law he never agreed to. He might be human, but he was not weak. I won't let them chain you, he said softly to Soraya, his voice carrying the weight of his promise. Her eyes widened, her lips parting as if to speak, but the leader shouted again, and this time the chant grew louder, shaking the night air. The warriors stamped their feet against the ground, their weapons glinting in the moonlight. The human stood tall, his shadow cast long against the riverbank. He met the leader's burning gaze and shouted back, "Then I'll face your trial." The forest went silent, broken only by the crackle of torches and the rustle of armor. The warriors stared at him with surprise, some with disbelief, others with cruel smiles. Their leader lowered his arm slowly, his sharp teeth showing in something between respect and mockery. Soraya gasped, clutching his arm tightly. "No, you don't understand what you've done. The trial is not a fight, it is a death sentence." Her voice shook as tears slid down her cheeks. "You will not come back alive." He looked at her, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. "I didn't let you drown," he said firmly, his voice unshaken. "I won't let them kill you either. Whatever this trial is, I'll survive it." Her hand shook against him, torn between hope and despair. The clan leader spoke once more, his voice echoing like a drumbeat. The woman translated with a whisper that carried both fear and awe. "At sunrise, the trial begins." The warriors roared, their chant rising again, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The human stood in the center, drenched and exhausted but unbroken. He had refused the bond, but by doing so, he had stepped into something far greater. A trial that no human had ever faced. A trial that could mean his death. Soraya lowered her head, her tears falling to the earth. She whispered so only he could hear, "You should have let me drown. Now they will destroy you." But the human only looked at the warriors, his jaw set, his eyes burning with quiet fire. "We'll see," he said under his breath. And in that moment, the night itself seemed to wait, holding its breath for what dawn would bring. The sun had not yet risen when the human was taken from the riverbank. The alien warriors surrounded him on all sides, their heavy steps shaking the ground as they marched him through the dark forest. Soraya followed behind, her hands bound, her face pale with worry. Torches lit their path, casting long shadows on the trees, and the silence was broken only by the sound of armor and chanting voices that spoke of the trial. They brought him into a wide clearing where ancient stones stood like broken teeth rising from the earth. Strange marks were carved into the stones, glowing faintly with blue light. This place felt old, older than memory, a place where many lives had ended. The human could feel it in the air, thick with the weight of fear and blood. He swallowed hard, his heart beating heavy in his chest, but he did not let them see his fear. The clan leader stepped forward and raised his hand, silencing the crowd. His deep voice carried through the clearing as he spoke in their language. The warriors cheered, their voices sharp like blades. Soraya translated in a trembling whisper. "He says the trial of worth begins now. If you survive, the bond is yours. If you die, your blood feeds the law." The human's fists tightened, but he stayed silent. He had no choice now. He had accepted this trial, and there was no way out. Warriors moved forward, carrying weapons and shields. They circled him, their eyes hungry for his death. He had no sword, no shield, nothing but his hands and his mind. The first warrior stepped into the circle, tall and broad, his armor covered in scars. He swung a heavy blade that hummed with strange energy. The human's heart pounded, but his mind sharpened. He knew he could not match strength with these giants. He had to use speed, wit, and instinct. The warrior roared and charged. The human dodged quickly, rolling aside as the blade smashed into the stone ground, sparks flying. He picked up a broken branch from the ground and struck the warrior's leg. The weapon was weak, but the sudden move made the alien stumble. Before the warrior could recover, the human kicked hard at the back of his knee, sending him crashing down. The crowd gasped, their chant faltering for a moment. The human grabbed the fallen weapon, that heavy and strange in his hands, but he lifted it with a grunt. He pointed it back at the circle. Another warrior entered, faster than the first, his twin blades spinning like fire. The human struggled to keep up, blocking strike after strike with the heavy weapon. Sparks flew as steel met steel, and pain shot through his arms with every clash. He ducked low, barely avoiding a blade that sliced the air near his neck. His breath came fast, his chest burning. At the last moment, he let the heavy weapon fall, stepping inside the warrior's swing. He drove his elbow hard into the alien's chest, then struck his throat with desperate force. The warrior stumbled back, choking, before collapsing. The crowd roared now, half in rage, half in shock. The human stood in the circle, panting, blood running down his arm from a cut, but still alive. He turned his eyes to Soraya. She stared at him with wide eyes, tears on her cheeks. She whispered, though no one else could hear, "They will never let you go now. You are proving yourself. That means you are theirs." The third warrior stepped forward, this one older, his face marked with lines of battle. He carried no weapon, only his fists. The human knew at once this would be worse. The alien's body moved with speed and precision, every strike heavy and accurate. The human blocked one blow, then another, but pain exploded in his ribs as a fist slammed into his side. He staggered back, coughing, almost falling. The crowd shouted louder, urging the warrior to finish it. But the human's eyes sharpened. He had learned to take pain, to endure. As the warrior charged again, the human grabbed a handful of dirt from the ground and threw it into his face. The alien roared, blinded, stumbling for a second. It was enough. The human struck his knee hard with a rock, sending him down, and then kicked with all his strength until the warrior fell unconscious. The crowd exploded in chaos. Some shouted in fury, others in disbelief. No human should have survived this long. The leader raised his hand again, and silence fell. His glowing eyes studied the human with something like respect, and also something darker. The human dropped to his knees, his body trembling from exhaustion, blood dripping from his wounds. He could barely breathe, but he forced himself to stand again. He would not fall here. He would not give them the satisfaction. He looked at Soraya, her face pale and full of fear, and he gave a small nod. He was still alive. He had not given up. The leader spoke again, his voice echoing across the stones. Soraya's lips trembled as she translated. "They say you are worthy, but they will never let you go. You have taken their law into your blood. From this moment, you are bound." The human's heart pounded as he stood, blood and sweat covering him. He had survived what no human was meant to survive. He had faced the trial of worth and lived. But as he looked into Soraya's eyes, he saw the truth. His victory was not freedom. It was a chain, heavier than death itself. She whispered with tears falling, "You don't understand. You are theirs now, and they will never let me or you escape." The human stood in silence, the chant of the warriors filling the clearing once again, the sound of a cage closing around him. He had survived the trial, but survival had only brought him deeper into the storm. The night was heavy with drums and firelight when they dragged him into the heart of the alien village. His body still ached from the trial, his arms bruised, his ribs screaming with every step, but the warriors forced him forward. Soraya walked beside him, her hands bound with glowing cords, her head lowered. The entire clan had gathered, their glowing eyes fixed on him, their chants rising like waves. Torches burned in a circle, lighting the ritual ground. Strange symbols glowed on the stones beneath their feet, and the air carried the smell of smoke and herbs. The human's mind raced. He had survived their deadly test, but now he was trapped in another cage. The trial had proven him worthy, but what that meant was something he did not understand. The clan leader stood tall before the crowd, his voice booming with power. He spoke in long, rolling words, every sentence greeted with cheers from the warriors. Soraya trembled as she translated quietly for him. "They say the bond must now be sealed. Tonight, before the moons pass, I must be joined to you. If the law is broken, we both die." The human's chest tightened. "I didn't come here to take you," he whispered to her, his voice low so only she could hear. "I never wanted this." Her eyes glistened in the firelight, and her lips trembled. "I know, but the law does not care what you want. If you refuse them, I will be the first they kill. The only way to save me is to accept. His fists clenched, his heart torn. He looked at the crowd, at their sharp weapons glinting in the torchlight. Every eye burned with expectation, not of love or care, but of tradition, unbreakable and merciless. He turned back to Soraya. She looked fragile, almost broken, her silver hair falling over her face, her body shaking. Yet there was also strength in her eyes, a strength that made him hesitate. She was ready to face this fate if it meant protecting him, but she was afraid too. The warriors brought forward a stone altar, covered with markings that shimmered faintly. Upon it they placed chains of silver and cups filled with glowing liquid. The leader raised his hands, declaring words in their tongue, and the crowd fell silent. The human understood nothing of the speech, but he felt the weight of it pressing on his chest. Soraya leaned closer, whispering with her head bowed. They will bind our hands with the chains. We must drink from the cups. That is how they make the bond real. She paused, her voice breaking. Once it is done, there is no way back. The human's throat was dry. He wanted to shout at them, to break the chains, to refuse this madness. But when he looked into her eyes, he saw her fear. She was not afraid of him. She was afraid of what they would do if he rejected her. He realized then that his choice was not about law or freedom. It was about her life. The leader motioned, and two warriors approached. They took his arm and Soraya's, forcing them to kneel before the altar. The chains glowed as they wrapped them around their wrists, locking them together. The heat of the metal burned into his skin, but he did not flinch. He felt Soraya's hand trembling against his, her skin soft, her breath quick. The cups were raised, one placed to his lips, one to hers. The liquid inside glowed like fire, thick and strange. He hesitated, but the warriors pressed it closer, their eyes sharp with warning. Soraya whispered, "Drink, or they will kill me." He swallowed hard and drank. The taste was bitter, burning his throat like acid, making his stomach twist. Soraya drank too, her lips shaking as she forced it down. The crowd roared in approval, the sound rising high into the night sky. The drums grew louder, beating like a second heartbeat inside his chest. As the ritual ended, the leader stepped forward, raising his arms high. His voice thundered across the clearing. Soraya translated in a broken whisper. "It is done. They say I am yours now, not just by law, by blood." The human's heart sank. The crowd cheered, stamping their feet, their chants echoing through the forest. Firelight danced across their faces, fierce and wild. He looked at Soraya, her eyes full of tears, her body trembling against him. He could feel her fear, her shame, but also something else, a silent plea. She wanted him not to let go. He leaned closer, whispering so only she could hear. "I don't accept their law, but I will protect you, no matter what." Her breath caught, and for the first time, her eyes softened. She gave the faintest nod, almost invisible in the firelight, but enough to tell him she had heard him and believed him. The crowd pressed closer, singing their chants, celebrating the bond. Warriors lifted their weapons high, sparks of fire rising into the night sky. The leader looked at them both with cold satisfaction, as if a game had been won. But the human's heart was heavy. He had been forced into a marriage of chains, bound by law he did not believe in. Yet as he looked at Soraya, clinging to his arm, he knew he would not abandon her. Even if it meant facing the fury of her people, even if it meant standing alone against an entire clan, he would fight. The drums thundered, and the celebration grew wilder. But deep inside the human's chest was a quiet vow. He would find a way to break these chains, not only of metal and law, but of fear. He had saved her once from the river. Now he would save her again, from the law that called her his. The night ended with fire and song, but for him and Soraya, it was the beginning of something darker. They were no longer strangers. They were bound, and the weight of that bond was heavier than any chain he had ever carried. The night after the binding was restless. The human sat near the edge of the village, his wrists still aching where the glowing chains had burned into his skin. Soraya sat beside him, her face pale, her eyes lowered, and her voice silent. The chants of the clan had faded into the night, but the sound of drums still echoed in his ears. He knew the bond had not brought safety, only more danger. He felt it in the air, thick and heavy like a storm waiting to break. He was right. Just before dawn, the sound of horns shattered the silence. Shouts erupted, and the ground shook with hurried steps. The human leapt to his feet, his instincts sharp, while Soraya's face filled with fear. "Another clan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They have come to take me. They claim I should belong to them." The gates of the village burst open and armored warriors stormed inside. Their armor was darker, their eyes glowing with red instead of blue. They carried strange weapons shaped like curved blades, and their voices rose in cruel chants. The human watched as the two clans clashed, weapons striking, sparks flying, war cries echoing. Fire spilled from torches, and the smell of smoke spread quickly. In the chaos, Soraya was seized by one of the invading warriors. She screamed, struggling as they dragged her away. The human's blood burned. Without thinking, he rushed forward. He had no weapon but his hands and courage, yet he could not stand still. He tackled the warrior, slamming his shoulder into the alien's chest. The two crashed to the ground, rolling in the dirt. The alien struck with his blade, but the human caught his wrist, twisting hard until the weapon fell. With a desperate roar, he drove his fist into the alien's face again and again until the warrior went still. Soraya stumbled back, her breath quick, her eyes wide. "You'll be killed," she cried. But the human grabbed the fallen blade and stood in front of her. Then let them try. The battle raged around them, firelight casting wild shadows. The rival clan fought fiercely, their voices filled with hunger. To them, Soraya was not a woman. She was a prize, a bond to be stolen. The human realized this was no accident. They had been waiting, watching, and now they had come to take what his survival had earned. More warriors closed in, 3 at once. The human swung the curved blade awkwardly, blocking one strike, dodging another, but pain tore through his arm as the third cut across his shoulder. He staggered, but he did not fall. He countered with speed, ducking low and slashing one across the leg, then kicking another into the fire pit. The last charged, but Soraya grabbed a burning torch from the ground and struck him across the head. The warrior fell back with a roar of pain, his armor glowing with sparks. For a moment, their eyes met, hers filled with shock at her own action, his burning with determination. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice rough but steady. They moved through the chaos together, fighting side by side. The human's body screamed with exhaustion, but every time he thought of stopping, he saw Soraya's face, her fear, her trust. It pushed him forward. Warriors came at them again and again, but they fell one by one. The human fought with everything he had, fists, blade, fire, even stones from the ground. Soraya struck when she could, her hands trembling but strong. Yet the rival clan was many, and soon they were driven out of the village, chased into the dark forest. Branches whipped at their faces, roots caught their feet, but still they ran. Behind them, the shouts of the warriors grew louder. They were being hunted. At last, they reached a clearing, the moonlight shining down on them. The human bent forward, his chest heaving, blood dripping from his wounds. Soraya's hands shook as she touched his arm. "You can't fight them all," she whispered, tears in her voice. "They will never stop until one of us is dead." The human looked at her, his jaw tight, his eyes filled with fire. "Then they'll have to kill me first, because I won't let them take you." But even as he said the words, figures appeared from the trees, surrounding them once again. The rival warriors stepped closer, their blades glowing faintly. The human tightened his grip on the curved weapon, standing in front of Soraya, ready to fight until his last breath. His body trembled, his strength fading, but his will did not break. Soraya clung to his back, whispering, "Why do you keep risking your life for me?" Her voice was desperate, full of confusion. He didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the warriors closing in. "Because I already saved you once, and I'll keep saving you, no matter how many times it takes." The rival clan laughed cruelly, their leader stepping forward. His armor was heavier, his blade larger, and his voice was filled with mockery. "A human," he sneered in their tongue. "A human stands against us? Pathetic." Soraya understood his words and gasped, but the human didn't need a translation. He saw the scorn in their eyes. He raised his blade anyway, his voice steady. "Then come and see how pathetic I am." The warriors charged, and the clearing erupted into chaos once more. The human fought like a cornered beast, striking, blocking, dodging, even as pain tore through his body. Soraya grabbed stones, sticks, anything she could find, hurling them at the enemies, screaming for them to leave him. But there were too many, far too many, At last, the human and Soraya were pushed back against a fallen tree. Their enemies closed in, their weapons raised high. Soraya clutched his arm, her face pale with terror. They had no way out, no chance to win. The human stood tall, despite the blood running down his chest. He placed himself between her and the blades, his voice low but unshaken. If this is where it ends, then I end standing. The rival clan leader raised his blade high, the firelight flashing against its edge. Soraya closed her eyes, whispering a broken prayer. But in that moment, before the strike could fall, a horn sounded in the distance. The sound was sharp, powerful, cutting through the night. Both clans froze, their eyes turning toward the forest. The human's breath caught. Soraya's eyes widened. Someone else was coming, and whatever that horn meant, it would decide their fate. The horn echoed again, louder this time, shaking the trees. The rival warriors froze, their weapons still raised, but their steps uncertain. From the shadows of the forest, another group appeared, figures carrying banners marked with glowing symbols. It was Soraya's clan, the ones who had forced the bond. Their warriors stormed into the clearing, their weapons drawn, their eyes burning. The two clans clashed with a roar, steel against steel, the ground trembling beneath the fury of their fight. The human pulled Soraya behind him, gripping his stolen blade tightly. He was weak, bleeding, but his will remained strong. All around them, warriors fought and fell, their cries filling the night. Sparks flew as blades clashed, and the smell of blood and fire filled the air. Soraya's hand trembled against his arm, her face pale with fear. "They will not stop," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They fight for me, not for peace, and no matter who wins, I am nothing but a prize." The human turned to her, his eyes fierce despite his exhaustion. "You're not a prize. You're not theirs. You're not mine. You're free." His words carried a weight she had never heard before, a promise that felt stronger than law. But the rival clan's leader spotted them, his glowing eyes fixed on Soraya, his cruel smile spreading. He cut through the battle, his massive blade dripping red. "She belongs to us," he shouted in his tongue, pointing at her. Even without understanding, the human knew the meaning. The leader charged. The human stepped forward, blocking his path, their blades crashing together with a sound like thunder. The impact nearly knocked the human down, but he held firm, teeth clenched, every muscle straining. Blow after blow came, heavy and merciless. The human staggered, his arms shaking, but each time he rose again, refusing to fall. The rival leader roared, driving him back until his foot caught against a root. He stumbled, his weapon slipping from his grasp, and the enemy raised his blade high for the killing strike. Soraya screamed his name, running forward without thinking. She threw herself between them, her arms spread, her body trembling. "No," she cried in her own tongue. "He is mine by law. You cannot take him." The rival leader froze for a moment, his blade halted in the air. Murmurs spread through both clans, the battle slowing as the words echoed. She had claimed him, not as a prize, but as her bond, her choice. The human's eyes widened, his heart thundering. She turned her head slightly, looking at him with tears in her eyes. "I choose you," she whispered, her voice breaking but firm. "Not because of law, because you saved me, because you fight for me, because you never let me go." Her words struck the clearing like lightning. Both clans stopped, their weapons lowered, their eyes fixed on her. The rival leader's face twisted with rage. "Lies," he shouted. "Humans cannot be chosen." He raised his blade again, but before he could strike, the human grabbed a broken spear from the ground and thrust it forward with all his strength. The weapon pierced through the leader's armor, driving him back with a cry of pain. He fell to his knees, blood pouring, his eyes burning with fury before the light finally faded. The silence that followed was heavy. The rival warriors stepped back, their leader fallen, their chants dying in their throats. Soraya's clan raised their weapons in victory, their cries filling the night. The human collapsed to one knee, his body trembling, the spear slipping from his hand. Soraya rushed to him, holding his shoulders, her tears falling freely. The clan leader of Soraya's people stepped forward. His glowing eyes studied the human, then turned to Soraya. His voice was deep and solemn. Soraya translated softly, her voice shaking with disbelief. "He says the law has been fulfilled. By trial, by bond, by choice. I am yours." The human shook his head, his voice rough but steady. "No, you don't belong to me. You belong to yourself." Soraya looked at him, her breath catching. In that moment, something shifted inside her. For the first time, she felt free, not because of the clan, not because of the law, but because of the man who refused to claim her as property. The warriors lowered their weapons. Some bowed their heads, others whispered among themselves. For generations, their law had ruled without question. But now, before their eyes, a human had broken it. Not by rejecting it, but by reshaping it. By proving that worth was not about chains, but about choice. Soraya stood tall, still holding his arm, and turned to her people. Her voice was stronger now, rising above the whispers. I choose him, not because of your law, because he is worthy in ways you cannot see. The crowd stirred, murmurs spreading. The leader said nothing, his glowing eyes fixed on the human. Finally, he gave a slow nod, and the warriors lowered their heads in acceptance. The battle was over. The rival clan retreated into the forest, carrying their dead and wounded. Soraya's people gathered their fallen, their chants softer now, filled not with rage but with respect. The human stood with Soraya, his body aching, his wounds deep, but his spirit unbroken. As the first light of dawn touched the sky, Soraya leaned closer, her voice gentle. You saved me from the river. You saved me from the trial. You saved me from them. And now, you have saved me from my own clan's chains. He looked at her, his chest rising and falling with tired breaths. I didn't do it for law. I did it for you. She smiled faintly through her tears, her hand tightening on his. Then let this bond be ours, not theirs, ours. The sun rose slowly, bathing the clearing in gold. The war was over, but a new beginning had come. Soraya stood by the human, no longer as property, no longer as a prize, but as a woman who had chosen her own path. And beside her stood the man who had fought not just to save her life, but to give her freedom. The clans watched in silence as the two of them walked together toward the light of the new day. The bond was no longer sacred law. It was something stronger. It was choice. It was hope, and it was a promise that neither chains nor trials could ever break.